I want to begin with the level of fraud that we see now. Many people do not realize you were also part of the Republican legal team back in Gore v. Bush. Give us your sense of where we are right now in terms of electoral fraud.
Well, look, we've got litigation all over the country. The results of the election aren't final, and they're not final until the matters are litigated and the results have been finally tabulated, and there are recounts ongoing. You mentioned my book, One Vote Away. There's an entire chapter on the book on Bush versus Gore, and in 2000, I was part of George W. Bush's legal team, and if you think about it that night initially the news media called Al Gore the winner. Then they switched it and called George W. Bush the winner. But then what happened is Al Gore sent in an army of lawyers into Florida. They brought multiple lawsuits. And for 36 days, nobody knew what the result was. They had to litigate those matters. They had to complete the recount. And then at the end of the day, we learned who the winner was. During that time, and in the book One Vote Away, I take people behind the scenes in the war room where we had a whiteboard on the wall with 7 different lawsuits, any one of which could have cost the presidency of the United States. During that time, we conducted a full trial. We went to the Florida Supreme Court twice. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court twice, briefed it, argued, and got opinions. That took 36 days. The court system can move and can move quickly, and ultimately, George W. Bush prevailed because when the votes were counted, he had the most votes in Florida and he won. The same thing needs to happen here. The litigation needs to get resolved in each of the different states where they're pending cases, and then we'll know who has prevailed in this election. But that's going to take several weeks.
Would you not agree that it is it's further evidence of just how unconstitutional the idea of early voting, mail-in voting is, to realize that we're coming up against two important deadlines here as a result of disputes over these votes? One is December 8th, the other the 14th, and we have in some instances going up to the 20th of this month, votes being tabulated. This is outrageous. And how in the world did the idea of early balloting, early voting, mail-in balloting ever pass muster and get by the Supreme Court?
Well, mail-in voting historically has been significantly more subject to fraud. It's more susceptible to unscrupulous operatives stealing people's votes, engaging in vote harvesting, which we've seen. Unfortunately, in the era of COVID, a lot of Democratic states and Democratic jurisdictions used it as an excuse to expand mail-in voting. Now, there's a silver lining to that, which is as we have recount and contest litigation pending in the states, on Election Day, Donald Trump won a significant majority of the people who cast in-person ballots on Election Day. Of the early vote and the mail-in vote, Biden won a significant majority. The silver lining is that historically mail-in votes get excluded in a recount, get rejected in litigation much more frequently than in-person votes because they're more often subject to fraud. They're more often they don't meet the legal standards. What that means is as the litigation moves forward, there's some real possibility that we will see the vote totals for Joe Biden go down as illegal votes are excluded. And that's what the judicial process is meant to determine and what I expect it will be determining in the coming weeks.
Isn't there a collision here between the requirement for a uniform among the states, a uniform federal election day, and early voting, mail-in balloting, however you want to style it or term it? That just seems to fly in the face of giving the power of that electoral process over in each state to the state government.
Well, what the Constitution does is it gives the power of setting the time, place, and manner of the presidential election to the state legislatures. And it's unusual. Normally when the Constitution speaks of the state, it addresses the entire state government. In this instance, it specifies the legislature in particular. That is highly relevant, especially in Pennsylvania, because what happened is the legislature passed a law and set a rule that ballots, early ballots, mail-in ballots have to be received by Election Day.
We should point out.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Democratic governor and the Democratic Supreme Court just decreed that they were changing that. That attempting to change that is contrary to the Constitution. And I think if the Supreme Court considers that case on the merits, they are likely to conclude that what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did was unconstitutional.
And those facts were in evidence going into the decision to pass on a ruling beforehand before the Supreme Court. John Roberts demurring. Did he make a mistake?
I think the court did make a mistake. They should have taken the case. John Roberts joined the liberals and didn't take the case before the election. It would have been much easier to resolve it then. Subsequently, Justice Sam Alito wrote an opinion in which he said that the plaintiffs were quite likely to prevail on the merits. So the constitutional question was clear, and he ordered the state of Pennsylvania to segregate those late received votes, to keep them separate so that a court, if it concluded they were illegal, could exclude them. And I think that really foreshadowed that if the court takes this on the merits, it will likely strike it down. It's not certain the court would agree to take the case on the merits, but if they do, I think the president's likely to prevail on that legal question.
On that question, and also on will the court take into account that the complaints and charges here of both voter fraud and electoral fraud all fall upon the Democrats, not Republicans? That looks very bad, I would think, for anyone using common sense. Is it relevant in the high court?
Well, in terms of laying out the evidence of voter fraud, that really is a step that has to play out in the trial courts, both the state trial courts and federal trial courts. And, it's hard for any of us as informed citizens to really know exactly what happened. You see something on Twitter, you see a story here or there, but you don't know what the facts are. And that's why we have a judicial system where in court, the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign, they will send in their lawyers, they will put on evidence, they will put on expert witnesses, they will hear testimony, and the judicial system will make determinations of facts. That's how we find out what occurred, is that we have a system to test the facts. And so I'm hopeful, and what I expect to happen in the coming days and weeks is for the Trump campaign to put on their evidence and hopefully to convince a fact finder that their allegations of fraud are accurate and supported by the evidence.
Yeah, there are two elements here. One is, of course, the appearance, at least, of fraud across a broad number of states, and in each instance, the charges are against Democrats, not Republicans. The other part is that we have a president who the court will also be able to judge very clearly. The Democrats have been trying to both block his presidency, to overthrow his presidency through impeachment, as well as absolute, in my judgment, treason on the part of a number of government officials, the deep state, if you will. Those things should be taken into account, don't you think, as well, by the court, to see this as a continuation of what has been the resistance? They did not call it the healing. Isn't that interesting? Back in 2016, now they're calling it the healing period. Then it was the resistance that persisted till this very moment. Your thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, I don't know that the Supreme Court necessarily will give that great weight, but I do think the American people see it. The American people see that for 4 years, the Democrats attacked President Trump, denied the legitimacy of his election, fought him at every stage. You started with Andrew McCabe, who testified before the Judiciary Committee yesterday. I've got to say the behavior of the DOJ and the FBI under Barack Obama, they politicized it and used it to attack their enemies, and it was disgraceful. And I think the American people see that. The impeachment saga was an abuse of power as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why over 70 million Americans came out to support President Trump. We need every vote to be counted, every legal vote to be counted, and I'm hopeful that at the end of this process, we will determine the winner, and I very much hope President Trump is reelected. Let me say also, you mentioned a minute ago the Georgia Senate race. 2 Senate seats on the ballot January 5th. I'm going to be traveling to Georgia. Right. Control of the Senate hinges on the state of Georgia. And if you don't want to see the radical leftist agenda of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and AOC implemented, that Georgia Senate seat is to save the whole country.
Senator Ted Cruz, I'm sure that everyone is excited to see you in Georgia, and I'm pretty sure, too, that you'll be bringing a lot of your friends to the effort. And also, I want to compliment you on helping shed light on the Obamagate with Andrew McCabe and the Senate Judiciary hearing. You were terrific. We appreciate it, and appreciate what you're going to be doing in Georgia. As always, Senator Ted Cruz, thank you.